Hello, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Devon in the southwest of England. That will actually be probably the very last time I ever say that. And that is because in just over a week I will be leaving Devon and leaving England. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that, whilst I also show you some of the beautiful local scenery. So I've decided to carry on with this walk to Brixham, even though it is one of the most challenging walks in the local area. Really, lots of really steep hills, lots of steps, and I can already feel my muscles aching and struggling with all of this, but mustn't complain. I should be grateful that I am able to do this and that I have the opportunity to do this. So, some beautiful colours, and now we're away from the beach with the yapping dogs. I can hear the beautiful sounds of the birds. Perhaps you can hear them too. You know, I've been reading a lot of old stories and myths lately to try and help me make sense of the huge changes that I'm making in my own life at the moment. Because I have been struggling with it and I have been questioning it. And I have actually found some comfort in this. I've also been doing a little bit of research and come across quite a lot of sort of academics and researchers who have created models that have really helped me to understand my own situation and to feel less alone in my struggles. So for example, Joseph Campbell says that myths all share a common pattern, and there's 3 stages. There's departure, initiation and return. And with departure, okay, I can certainly relate to that. Now I am leaving behind Teignmouth. I've never actually said where I've lived on film before because of privacy reasons, but I can say it now that I'm no longer living there. So, lovely little town in Devon, in South Devon, and a wonderful community, and I will be really, really sad to leave it. In fact, I already feel sad, even though I've not actually left yet. So this stage is all about plucking up the courage to make that big change, recognising that for whatever reason the current situation no longer fits with who you are, what you want out of life and so on. And then the initiation is choosing an alternative and understanding the implications and all the next steps and trying to figure things out as you go along. And I suppose the initiation has started a little bit with me. I've started reaching out to people in Spain, I've started doing little bits of research. But the real exciting and painful part of that journey will begin when we land in Spain. So it's not started yet. And obviously the return has not yet started. And then another one, Carl Jung, he also talks about 3 stages. In fact, I think all of these people talk about 3 stages. But he talks about the breakdown of the old self, descent into unconscious or shadow, and then emergence of a more integrated self. So with the first point, the breakdown of the old self, I would say the identity has been a big part of that for me. So I've had to come to terms with the fact I'll no longer be a library assistant. And I was there yesterday and spent 2 hours helping a lady with her tech problems, and I had this real sense that I was doing some good in this world. I felt really good about my role in that library, and yeah, it's strange to think that that's no longer part of who I am. Yeah, so that first stage, the identity, is surprisingly important. So no, yeah, as I say, I'll be no longer a member of the library, no longer a member of Teignmouth Writers. I said goodbye to them this week, went along, and it was a wonderful meeting we all had, maybe about 15 of us there. And they've helped me so much over the last year or so, and they're such an inspirational and talented bunch of people. And it's strange to think that I'm no longer part of that as well. So yeah, and I could give lots of other examples, but perhaps really this loss of identity happened actually 18 months ago for me when I gave up work. So then I was no longer a project manager, no longer an expat, no longer a car driver, no longer living in continental Europe. And so I had to really think hard about who am I, and yeah, where is my place in this world. And so now I'm going through that again, and so I can relate to that first step that Carl Jung described as the breakdown of the old self. Then the second step, he said, descent into unconscious or shadow. So I don't know whether I'm quoting these people correctly. Actually, these are just rough notes I jotted down in my book. But this word descent, it made me think, okay, yeah, there's a lot of fear, sadness, anger, regret, shame, vulnerability. There's all sorts of different feelings and emotions that pop up from time to time in relation to what I'm doing now. And it may seem strange to think that, for example, I feel shame, but actually, you know, I am leaving behind people who love us and care about us. I have not been able to raise the money to buy a house here for my wife. So there is a certain amount of shame, but I don't feel that all the time. In fact, I don't feel that much of the time at all. It's just occasionally that feeling, that thought crops up or pops up in my mind. But this is an important step, because here is where we learn to be compassionate towards others who are going through similar situations, where we build up our resilience and empathy, and we perhaps learn how to process grief, because what I'm going through here at the moment really is a form of grief, because I am saying goodbye to a big part of my life forever. And then the third step in Carl Jung's process, this emergence of a more integrated self, I think the goal here is not to go back to your old self, but to be someone who is more complete, and perhaps who can hold joy and sadness, strength and uncertainty, for example, so that you become a more rounded individual, better able to handle life's ups and downs. And then there was someone called Richard Rohr, never heard of him before. And he talked about 3 stages: order, disorder and reorder. So in the first part, life makes sense. We know who we are, we know how the world works, and we have our routines, and everything feels fairly settled and well established. And then when we make these big changes in our life, it just descends into chaos, or it feels like chaos. And this can come as a result of, I don't know, illness, loss, conflict, aging, the realisation that your current setup in life no longer works. And so you go through, again, this difficult middle stage of all of this, processing it all and figuring out how to adapt to the changes you want to make in your life. And then slowly but surely a new person emerges. But this can't be rushed. It takes time. And in fact, I sometimes wonder whether I've been doing this for my whole life, really. I mean, all of these different stages that these different people talk about could be applied to certain chapters in my life, like when I went from adolescence to adulthood, or when I got married, or when I had children, or when I first moved house, or when I moved job. But I've done so many of these moves in my life that I'm starting to wonder whether my whole life is in fact going through through this, and maybe the return actually comes at the very end of my life. But maybe that's a bit too deep, I'm not sure. But yeah. Then the next one, because I've also looked at a spiritual angle to this, and I've not come across this before, John of the Cross, and he talked about 3 stages as well: purgation, illumination and union. So the first one, the purgation, is letting go of illusions, false ideas about ourselves, certain ways of living. And it's often painful once you start to understand this and realise it. But then in the second stage, illumination, you get some new insights, you get a deeper sense of what matters, and you move on to the third phase, which is union, where you get a deeper peace and wholeness. So you feel connected to God, connected to ourselves, to life, and so on. And it's not about striving for perfection, but it's about getting a better balance in your life and becoming a more wholesome and rounded individual. So this week I read a couple of fairy tales, and one of them was Hansel and Gretel. So going back to my childhood there, I think it took me about 15 minutes to read it, if that. So it was a very short, simple story. But it was another one of these where I could relate a little bit to the story. And that's because Hansel and Gretel, 2 young children, lived in a little cottage with their father and their stepmother. And they were very poor, and it got to the point where they couldn't even afford to eat. So the stepmother suggested, or insisted, that they take the children out to the woods and leave them there. Now Hansel heard this discussion going on and prepared himself and gathered together some pebbles, so that as they walked into the woods the next day, he dropped down some pebbles that he could use to navigate his way back home the next day. So they had a night in the woods, absolutely hated it, and went back home. Unfortunately, the stepmother became even more determined to take them into the woods, so this time they took them further into the woods. And Hansel this time had got no pebbles, so he used bits of stale bread. So he dropped the breadcrumbs, and he and his sister spent the night in the woods again, hated it, were very frightened. And Hansel said, "Don't worry, we can go back home tomorrow. I've dropped down all these breadcrumbs and we can follow them back to our cottage." Unfortunately, the birds had eaten all the breadcrumbs, so they couldn't find their way back. And this meant they had to go deeper into the forest. And there they came across all sorts of dangers. It was a very traumatic experience, but they came out of it better. It's where they discovered their treasures, and they were able to go back home to their father, and they then had enough money to be able to eat as a family, and it was a happy ending. So why do I relate to this? Well, it follows this formula, doesn't it, of these 3 stages. And I think what stood out for me, this one, was they did it twice. And I think I'm thinking about that now, is the fact that I left England to go to Germany, I came back, and now I'm going off to Spain. And so it's we're doing it a second time. It feels very different this time. And it's a bit like standing on the edge of the forest. I can just see the edge of the forest, but I've no idea what I'm going to discover once we go in there. And that is a little bit frightening, a little bit scary. But hopefully I will also find some treasure in that whole experience and come out of it a better person, and grateful that I'd had the opportunity to do that amazing thing. So yeah, there we go. Little fairy tale for you. Look at all the beautiful colours. I think that was worth all the hard work of getting here. Okay, I'm nearly at Brixham now. I probably won't take any video footage there because I guess it'll be too busy. But yeah, thanks for joining me on this little walk. It's been a very pleasant stroll, a bit more than a stroll actually, I think. I'm certainly going to know about it when I sit down tonight, but yeah, I hope it's a nice end to my time here in Devon. I was thinking about going to Cornwall tomorrow, but I think I ought to knuckle down and get on with some of the many admin tasks I've got in order to be ready for the big move later next week. Anyway, I hope you're well wherever you are. Thanks so much for joining me over the last 18 months if you have. I really appreciate all of you for subscribing and liking and commenting, or even just watching. It's great to not be doing this on my own. Yeah, so what is it? Hasta luego. I don't even know how to speak Spanish. That shows how bad my Spanish is probably, but yeah, I'll see you again soon from somewhere south of here, I guess. All right. Well, that's it then. So take care of yourselves. See you again soon. Thanks then. Bye.